Thank you, Poch, and thank you, Tracy and Katie and Carter and everyone at CascadiaFest to invite me to speak here today. It means a lot to me. And thank you all for coming, despite this not being really a CSS talk, but I hope it will be relevant to your work and interests anyway. So just like me and probably most of you, a lot of people enjoy or would enjoy to contribute to open source projects. And on the other side, open source projects love contributors or contributions. And yet I keep seeing newcomers who struggle to contribute, and contributors and maintainers to struggle to find contributors. So what is the catch? The catch is that the step from wanting to contribute on one side and actually becoming a contributor on the other side is really, really hard. It's much harder than it needs to be. It already starts when you Google like how to contribute to an open source project, and the pages that you find, they're not really helpful. It's very challenging for many. And even if they find the project, there's a lot of anxiety that keeps them from contributing. Like many think they don't have anything to contribute. But even if they overcome the anxiety and all the other barriers, more often than not, their experience is not very good. And if something like this happens, they are just burned. They are burned not only for this project, they are burned for any project for a long, long time. And I think that this is on us. I see this like a bug in our community, and I think we should fix this. So hi, I'm Gregor. I'm GR2M on Twitter, and I'm currently managing the code team at Hoodie. The code team is represented by Charlie, the beaver in the back making their marshmallows. And there is the low-profile dog, and there's the block bear, the alpaca designer, dog stocks chicken, the merkids, and all together, we want to make open source to be welcoming to everyone. And despite Hoodie being an independent open source project, there is no organization, sponsoring it, or like no donor. We actually managed to be recognized for one of the most diverse and inclusive communities. So how did we do that? Growing our community is kind of like a conversion funnel in 3 stages. We try to grow interest in contributing by actively reaching out. Once people found their way to Hoodie, we want to make it fun for them to contribute. And then once they started to contribute, we want to keep it fun for them so they stick around and become maintainers and help us to grow in a sustainable way. So let's start at stage 1, the outreach. Traditionally, open source contributors come from users of your project. They run into a problem, the documentation is lacking, they want a feature to be added. So they use code hosting platforms like GitHub to send a pull request, and through that way become a contributor to your project. But if you're just sitting there and waiting for these users to become contributors, you are missing out. Because there are actually a lot of people out there who just want to be part of a nice community, like people who are looking for mentors and people who want to surround themselves with people that are good to them, whom they can teach or learn from. And all you have to do is to promote your project by going where your future contributors are. These are a few projects that you should check out, and I would just walk through them really quick. So one is First Timers Only, which is started by Scott Hanselman and Kenzie Dodds. And basically the idea is that friendly open source projects should reserve a certain threshold of open source issues for first-time open source contributors only. And I think this is a great, simple idea, and if every open source project out there would do it, our community would be in a much better state, I think. Based on that idea, someone created a Twitter account. Every time you add the label First Timers Only to your GitHub issue, this account will tweet about it. So you will reach people who are looking to contribute for the first time. Your First PR is another Twitter account, but it's manually maintained by our Charlotte Spencer, and they only promote issues after reviewing them. And as you can see, they have quite some outreach. Actually, they have over 5,000 followers by now. So it's definitely worth to prepare like well-documented issues and then ping your First PR to promote your issues. Code Triage is a project by GitHub. You can register with your GitHub repository, and then people will help you triage your issues. And right now, they have over 10,000, people signed up, and I think over 2,000 open source repositories. Then there are initiatives like Google Summer of Code, which is a great way to find contributors who can work on your project on 3 months, for 3 months, because they actually get a grant and get paid for it. RailsGuild Summer of Code is a similar idea inspired by Google Summer of Code. But instead of targeting students, they target women. And instead of working alone, women have to find another woman to team up with, and they work as teams, which I think is a great idea. And you can submit your project, your open source project, to be one of the projects that then the teams can work on for 3 months, and as well they are paid for the work. We made very good experiences with it. We had a team working on Hoodie last year, and we have a team working on Hoodie right now. And here are the deadlines. So you have a lot of time. If you want to sponsor it, do it now. If you're thinking about applying as a team, it will be early next year. And if you want to apply as a project, it will be end of this year probably, or early next year. Outreachy is very similar, but it's not only for women, but for all people who are underrepresented in our tech industry right now. And their deadline is coming up, so make sure to try to submit your project or apply to be one of the people who get a grant to work on open source projects. I think the best way to promote your project is through word of mouth. And one reason why it's worth investing into making the experience of contributing a good one is that even if they leave after the first contribution, they will remember how good this experience was and they will talk about it. Even if they don't contribute at all, but just see how much you care, they will, talk about it in their circles, and you will get new contributors through that. Hosting events is probably the simplest way to find contributors in your neighborhoods or wherever you're going. And with events, I don't mean something as spectacular as CascadiaFest. It can be something as simple as just making a monthly after-hour hacking at your office, even with just 5 to 10 people that can come and work, and you can onboard them to your project. Something we do at Hoodie is a thing called Meet the Hoodies, which we try to organize everywhere we go. And it doesn't need any preparation. It just needs a location, and then people will come. We have issues already prepared, and then we work together and just get to know each other. Another tip is to join forces with other projects. This is a picture of an event I co-hosted with my friend Kim Creighton from Atlanta. We called it Welcome to Open Source, and the idea is that you reach out to open source projects and ask them to prepare issues for this event. Then you invite newbies and people who are able to coach them. And then altogether we help newbies to make their first open source contribution. It's a very simple idea, and pretty much everyone could do it in any city. There was, for example, an open source night before Empire.js, which pretty much was the same idea without that we ever talked to each other, which is really interesting. And I just moved to LA myself, and I'm working on preparing similar events. So if you are from LA or the area, please find Machiko or me, because we want to talk to you and we would love to get you more involved in this. Many open source projects are about more than just code. You want to solve a problem in real life. So for example, at Hoodie, kind of our overarching mission is to lower the barrier to make technology more accessible to everyone. So talk about that, talk about your overarching goal of what you try to achieve, and ask for help, because it turns out that there are people that are really good with words, and probably believe in what you want to achieve. And just as you as developers, or us as developers, are really good to like turning an opportunity or a problem into code, others are really good to turning an opportunity or a problem into a blog post or a newsletter. And one reason I think why Hoodie has such a good reputation and outreach is because we have amazing writers like Jen Turner, who not only is managing Hoodie's editorial team, but she will also give a talk here at CascadiaFest on Thursday on open source beyond software, and make sure not to miss it. And last but not least, stickers. Stickers are awesome. I think I have some stickers here as well, so please find me. Stickers are great because people put them on their laptops and like an icebreaker, and then people ask, like, what is a sticker, right? And you talk about it, and we just love stickers. It's our currency. Next up, make it fun. And when I say make it fun, that explicitly means make it fun for everyone. And the most important part to make a space fun is to create a safe space. I think that the reason why the Cascadia team goes to such far lengths, invests so much effort to make this a safe place for everyone is that it just doesn't matter how awesome the speakers are and how awesome the talks are and how awesome the venue is. If people do not feel safe to attend, they will just not come. And we as a community will miss out on the perspectives and voices and ideas, and I don't think we want to afford that. And the same is true for open source projects. A very good resource for that is Contributor Covenant by Caroline Ada-Emke. But refrain, to just go there and copy and paste it on your project's website. Make sure to take your time and read it, and make sure that you can actually enforce this code of conduct and be prepared to enforce it. According to the definition of open source itself, your library is not open source unless it has a license. And people will refrain from using your code, will refrain from contributing to it, and you will just get in a lot of trouble. So go to choosealicense.com, and just be done with it. It's a low-hanging fruit. Make sure to do it. In open source, what I've observed a lot, including at Hoodie actually in the past, is we tend to differentiate between coders and non-coders. And please stop doing this. I learned my lesson, stop doing this. Because when we say non-coders, we pretty much say the rest. There are coders and there is the rest. And nobody wants to belong to the rest. So just list them, at Hoodie we have coders and writers and designers and people who do documentation and host events. And they're all equally important. Other things is to use simple language, because not everyone in your audience is a native English-speaking person like myself. Use gender-neutral language, avoid phrases like, hey guys, because there are a few people who feel excluded by that, so just don't exclude them. And caring about wording in all of your project's communication gives you the opportunity to set the tone throughout your community, and that really helps to, lower this, these unfriendly, over-demanding, self-entitled requests from strangers that we see in open source projects, because it just feels weird to be a jackass if everyone around them is actively nice to each other. Lower the barriers and keep them low, and that pretty much means optimize for contributors, new and existing. Don't optimize for yourself as the maintainer. Optimize and keep your contributors in mind always, at all times. And remember, especially for new contributors, oftentimes it's not the contribution that is intimidating, it's actually the process of the contribution. So avoid excessive guidelines. For code, for example, if you have as your project grows, try to split it up into smaller modules. For example, Hoodie used to be a very big monolithic project, and we we had a very hard time to find new contributors to it because it just became too complex. And it was clear that we will never be able to maintain and grow the Hoodie community on such a code base. So we decided to split it up, into smaller modules, and really with the main objective to make Hoodie as contributors friendly as we possibly could. And today, Hoodie is split up into 16 modules, like Hoodie core is split up into these 16 modules. And if someone is just looking to contribute, they don't need to understand Hoodie in its entirety. They can get any of these modules and pick an issue. All these modules are documented and tested. And if they like this experience, they can go to the next module and just kind of go from there. And it helped us so much to get new contributors. And if you're interested in that, guess what? There is another talk by Stefan who will pretty much talk about how you can automate a lot of this code chore work on Thursday as well at 4:30. This is the only code that I show in my talk at a talk conference, I think. Hoodie used to require a lot of stuff, like a lot of build tools, and it required Grunt, it required CouchDB, a database, which required an Erlang runtime environment, and we went to file links to get rid of all of that. And today, the only things you will need is node.js and Git, and you can just contribute to Hoodie. You don't need to understand or learn anything else. And I know this is much harder, especially when you work on CSS, because usually you need like a server which does browser auto reload and so on. But just keep in mind that everything you add to your tooling belt, which might make your life easier as a maintainer, will higher the bar for new contributors. Saying something like, if someone comes to your project and you say, oh yeah, just look through the GitHub issues, it's a great way to lose a potential contributor, I think. Instead of that, try to create a dedicated place for new and existing contributors, because it shows that you care. And in this place, you can actually show what kind of contributions are you looking for, and you can show how much they matter to you, whom to ask for help. You can mention the guidelines. You can link to open issues, and show what people are currently working on. Something that we are currently working on at Hoodie is what we call the Hoodie Camp, which is like a front-end application which works directly with the GitHub API. So instead of finding their way around GitHub, we made this kind of little application dashboard which shows them all these issues directly that we want them to see, and at the same time you kind of have full control over the experience. And for maintainers, we want to show open pull requests that are awaiting a review. We want to show them issues that are stale because there is no activity, and much, much more than that. If you're interested, I would love to collaborate on ideas like that beyond the Hoodie community. So imagine you went to Hoodie Camp. You just joined our Hoodie Slack, and we would send you to one of the issues that we would prepare. And the issue looks like this. And probably you might think, like, holy moly, they really invested a lot of time into this, which is true, and exactly for this kind of reaction, because we want to make it easier for people to contribute, and I think everyone can do that, including yourself. Now, you might think that this is too much work for just one contribution, but is it just for one contribution? Like, how many people you think will actually see that issue? And once the work is done, this is an amazing issue to onboard a new maintainer, because they can follow the same steps to actually review the issue. It's all about creating, a community of people who will go out and spread the word about how awesome your project is, which will help you, reach out to even more contributors. So it's one thing to gain new contributors. It's a whole different story to retain them. Most of your contributors will be volunteers, and that means as an open source project, you're pretty much doomed to be fun. Once someone's contribution is ready, probably in the form of a pull request, try to get back to them as quickly as possible. Like a comment like, thanks for this, I will review it next week, is much better than not reacting at all. And once a code contribution gets merged, release the new version as fast as possible. Something that we did at Hoodie is pretty much automate our release process. So once we merge something, we change the commit message, which GitHub allows us to do now. And then based on the commit prefix, pretty much a different kind of version gets released, and it just happens automatically. There is no manual work with this. And we did it pretty much because of this reason. In open source projects, most of the communication with your users and contributors, maintainers, is very anonymous. And it makes a huge difference when your contributors are able to connect, even if it's just through a short video. So something like regular team meetings works very, very well to kind of remove, this anonymous barrier. People will learn the story, will know that there's actually a human behind it, and it will make the communication afterwards in chats and GitHub issues much, much more effective. Something I personally like to do is to offer a short 5-minute call to just introduce myself and thank for a contribution. And that works really, really well. Like others, projects and postcards or organized events, for example. A committer can actually edit code, they can create branches, they can manage issues, and it's a sign of trust if you, give someone the role of a committer in your open source project. At the same time, at least on GitHub, there are a lot of things that you can do to protect your master branch. So you can say no commit can be merged into master unless it has 100% code coverage, unless all the tests pass, of course. There are even services for free that you can use to say that pull requests can only be merged once 2 maintainers commented with an LGTM, which is something that we do on Hoodie. So we can pretty easily give people committer right without running too much of a risk. A maintainer's overarching goal is to maintain and improve the space for contributors, which means respond to issues and prepare new issues for new contributors, to document workflows or to write tutorials, or to summarize what is happening in your community so others can follow it in their own pace. Also important is to avoid private discussions as much as possible. All discussions in open source should be documented and made public so that everyone has enough time to comment if they're interested in it. And make your processes transparent. For example, how someone becomes a committer or a maintainer. How does someone become part of the core team, for example. When you reach a certain size, these things have to be transparent. Say thank you and say it in public. This is really, really powerful. It's about fostering a culture around appreciation. And not how big of the contribution was it in terms of, was it 10,000 lines of code or was it 3? But just for the fact that someone contributed, because every contribution has a different story behind them. And showing real appreciation is proven to have an effect. There was a very large-scale field study on Wikipedia which proved that a truly symbolic award increased the retention rate of new editors by over 20%. So I praised automation a few times in this talk now, but don't treat people like you treat code. So automation does not really apply to communication. I love Sharon Seed's quote in this regard, because when it comes to communication, like criticism or appreciation, the moment you automate it, it just becomes meaningless. So this is probably the main reason why community management is so hard, because it just doesn't scale. It doesn't scale as the code part of open source. It is labor intensive. And you cannot scale on good intentions, because with more users, you will need more contributors. And with more contributors, you will need more maintainers. And I highly recommend to read Michael's blog post. It's called Healthy Open Source, and it has a lot of insights from his experience managing the Node community. So how to not burn out? Our conclusion at Hoodie is that we need help. We need a community manager, a person who is in charge to maintain the best possible experience for everyone in the community. Someone who is available in case of a dispute or in case of a code of conduct infringement. Someone who can do all the invisible chore work that is so important but barely appreciated or recognized. And we think that this is not a role for a volunteer. We rely on that person and we want to hold them accountable. And because of that, we think it's a good idea to actually pay such a person. Which brings us to the topic of money and open source. This is a topic worth for its own talk, definitely. So I just want to kind of sum it up in 3 steps. For one, what's the value of open source? Hoodie is a so-called infrastructure project. And especially there is Nadia Ekbal, who just created a lot of content on the value of open source, and I highly recommend you to read Roads and Bridges, the unseen labor behind our digital infrastructure, a paper that she just recently published. There's a growing awareness of how underfunded open source projects are, and I think there will be more funding available in the time to come. As Hoodie, we invest a lot of our time into fixing more like the human problems in our industry, which is appreciated, and it also allows us to apply for many different grants, which we do. And there are also people and organizations who want to amplify our impact. So this is something how we get money into the Hoodie project specifically. Also, we have quite a big outreach, as I mentioned, especially to our editorial team. And combined with a good standing in the community, this is a value for sponsors. Like thousands of people are visiting our website or reading our blog, subscribe to our newsletter, or follow us on Twitter. And we can promote sponsors through these channels. But you will face obstacles the moment you find people who actually want to give you money. In fact, legal obstacles were the main reason why we could not collect money for Hoodie in the past. But even if Hoodie had the bank account, how would you make the cash flow transparent? I have to run a little bit quicker now. So I want to show you Open Collective, which I am not affiliated to, but they pretty much fixed the problems that we had at Hoodie since 4 years, and I think they could fix it for you as well. They allow you to collect money in a transparent way and without a legal entity, which is awesome. And they amplify the exposure for your sponsors and supporters, because you can add them to your README and your website, embed them, and they kind of get automatically updated. It's really, really cool, and they have a fantastic team behind it. One last thing I want to say about money and open source, because it's very important, is it's tempting to just pay yourself or others to work on code or documentation, but if you pay people that they would otherwise do voluntarily, it creates the problem that when you start paying them, they will not contribute anymore. Also, if some people are paid for the same work that others are not, it will create a lot of tension. Hence, our kind of conclusion at Hoodie that we want to use that money to find community managers which will serve these contributors and make the experience of that as nice as possible. We wrote a blog post about all these kind of learnings and experiences that we have on the Hoodie blog about welcoming communities and how we plan to sustain it, if you want to read more about it. So as you can see, we are giving this a lot of thought at Hoodie, much more than other projects. And the only thing that I found out myself is that there is so little that we know, and there's so much more that we can do. For example, creating these issues that you have seen is a lot of, manual repetitive labor. Finding out who actually contributed to your community beyond just code is really, really hard. There are no tools for that. Or like showing appreciation is something that is not a workflow in our community right now. And I don't want to automate these things, as I mentioned, but I want to create the best possible tools for people who are managing communities. I think there is a lot of potential in that regard. And yeah, let me sum this up. Pretty much, CascadiaFest is awesome because it puts people first and it understands that code is not the challenge. People are. And I think we are pretty good at it. So let's lead the way and let us use our talents we have to make events like CascadiaFest not the exception but the default in our industry for everyone. Thank you.